an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Trickster Drift, chapters 15, 16, and 17, dysfunctional coping mechanisms, hex key therapy, and first day of class. In these chapters, Jared finally starts to really give some credence to all of the weird shit that's going on in this house. He makes a new friend who's also trying to stay sober, which is a huge deal. And his dumb teacher ruins his potential friendships with other classmates by singling him out and treating him like a teacher's pet. And that's super annoying. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. My deepest apologies for the way that I sound. I am just having a bad allergy attack, and I am hopeful that this will be pretty much gone by tomorrow or the day after. So, these chapters. I am into this book. I gotta say, I really liked the first book. And I don't really know what it is about the second one that's getting me more interested. But I think part of it is how much, I think that there's a little bit less focus on the people around Jared. I feel like Sarah started to sort of take over the story weirdly. And as much as I found a lot of her, rants very entertaining, and I agreed with her on a lot of things, there was just, I didn't feel a connection to that character, but he was so preoccupied with her, in part I felt like because there weren't a lot of options in his life for people who weren't garbage, that it was, kind of inescapable. And as much as these chapters, Jared is definitely distracted because he's trying to get in touch with her and she's not replying to him. Until later, when she finally does text but doesn't respond to his reply. As much as that's completely on par for the last book and his being worried about her, I think her as a person not being here is benefiting things a little bit. And it's sort of weird that I feel that way because I loved everything that was going on with his relationship with the Jaxes. So I'm not entirely sure what it is about Sarah that I found so frustrating. But because there are other very frustrating characters that I just didn't seem to have the same issue with. So yeah, I think it's a combo of Sarah and also him being away from his mom, who is so toxic and so wildly unpredictable. She's very predictable in that you know exactly what she'll do when she finds some shit out. And the thing that she will do is overreact. You know that right out of the gate. However, you never know when she's going to find out any given piece of information. So when the hammer falls is completely up in the air all the time. And that just gives you this anxiety, I feel like quite apart from, I don't know if you guys heard that, but my chest is doing some weird stuff. Quite apart from just the fact that she has addiction issues and all of this, there's just the sheer anxiety of living with somebody who could pop at any time. And those of us who live with somebody who have lived with someone who's abusive, you know what I'm talking about. That feeling of knowing that something can set them off, but you just don't know what it's going to be. And some things would set them off on one day, but they won't on another day. So it's entirely dependent on their mood. And there's just a real sort of vibe to the changes in Jared's life that I feel like are so much more positive and give him so much more room to breathe that I find the story more compelling now because I'm not just constantly worried about where he's going to fucking live, like as a base level, you know? It's sort of like that feeling in the story is true to life, where it's like, I just want the foundations to be taken care of so that we can get on with the other parts of the story. And Jared keeps insisting that he's not going to stay here, that he's not going to make this his home. But like, honestly, Jared, why not? I just don't see the downside. You know, maybe his aunt isn't perfect, but she certainly cares about him in a, like, very particular way. More than anybody in his life does right now. More than I would say his mother does. His mother loves him, but it's just a selfish love. It's just, you know. And his aunt, it's still sort of selfish. Like when you want to make amends so badly that you drive right over somebody's boundaries, that is not you making amends because you feel it's the right thing to do. It's you making amends because it makes you feel better. But I can forgive that, you know, like I really do understand the drive to make yourself feel better. And I don't really even think there's anything wrong with that. It's just, you know, I feel like Jared is letting the fact that she keeps kind of pushing little things to like drive him away from her. And as much as I appreciate him not liking to take from people because he's so used to there always being strings attached, I think that, I don't know what's going on. I'm sorry, guys. I sound like crazy. It sounds like there's a monster under my skin that's like growling. I think that Jared needs to get over it a little bit. I think he's like so preoccupied with worrying about taking from somebody who's offering. But it's sort of weird, like, he was willing to crash on all of his friends' couches all this time and take from people who plainly didn't really want to give. And even though I'm sure, like, it was uncomfortable, he was still, it felt like, more willing to deal with the sort of like the hints and dirty looks and whatnot from his friend's parents than he is willing to deal with his aunt really trying to like do what's best for him and care for him. And I'm sure that has something to do with baggage and abuse and feeling like you're not worthy of the help. And so when people give you dirty looks, that you feel like, well, yeah, sure, that's what I deserve. That's what I get. And when somebody offers freely, that makes you more suspicious and uncomfortable because that's unfamiliar. I think I can get where that comes from. But that does not mean that I am at all okay with how much he turns his back on what he's being given. I really want him to try and put down some real roots here. And there's a second reason for that. Because this place is obviously really magical for whatever reason. And I am fascinated to learn why this is the apartment she chose and what exactly effect that can have. Because he's not somebody who's like in touch with his abilities and power. It's not like he has the witchcraft that his mother has. But even so, if he's like living on this nexus of connection, does that do anything for him? Like, does that increase his ability or make it easier to access or something? Like, I'm just really interested in what it means for him to be living in this particular place. And that's a whole separate issue from him living there because of the stability of it and needing somewhere to be. I would want him to stay here just for that in the first place. But secondarily, what's going on in this house is just fascinating, and I want to know what the fuck is going on there. So I'm going to back up to chapter 15. And we start off with a kind of confrontation with Hank. Hank is a bit of a dick. He's like one of those people that like means well in general, but is so sure that he knows what's best for everybody else that he's willing to be incredibly pushy about it to a point that's just condescending and patronizing. And he doesn't seem to like have any understanding of how he comes across. But Jared wakes up and Hank is in the house. He's obviously like got keys to the place because he's watching TV. And I'm assuming at this point that he came over here to watch TV, even though he has a place right next door because his sons are playing on his TV with the Xbox. So he goes out there and Hank just says to him, "Still here?" And Jared says, "Hey." And the first thing he says is, "You need insurance for your scooter." And I'm like, okay, you know, like, dude, what do you... It's just like the kind of thing that this is not your business. Like, I understand that this is true, and he thinks that he's trying to help, but you're nobody to this kid, and let him figure his own shit out. Or talk to Maeve and have her talk with him about it. This is not your deal, you know? I just like, get the fuck out of here, dude. So then he comes up to him and says, do you have a plan for dealing with this David guy? You know, aside from whiny bitching on social media. Wow. Hank. What the fuck? What is the problem? Like, he's being... just... You know, and Jared says, "Dude, you don't even know me." "I know enough," Hank said. So he tries to get past Hank to leave the kitchen because he's just uncomfortable now. And he's just like, you know what, fuck it. I don't want coffee. I'm going to go out. And Hank won't move from the doorway. And so he says he stood close enough to feel Hank's breath on his face and said, "Your parents were addicted, workaholics, or just took off." "What?" Hank said. "Control makes you feel safe, thus your control issues." Hank looked like he wanted to grab Jared by the neck and wring, but he simply jabbed Jared in the chest. At this point, I'm rooting for your stalker. Maeve's hand whipped out and smacked Hank upside the head. Hank turned around and she motioned for him to move. She grabbed Jared's shoulder before he could retreat to the bedroom. Hank rubbed his ear, glaring at Jared. I'm really glad that she was there to not only stop this nonsense, but be a witness to how fucking unreasonable Hank is. I don't really get the role Hank has in her life. There are times when it feels like he's sort of a boyfriend type. Then there are times where he's like a brother. And then there's moments like this where she smacks him and yells at him and he's like a son. And, you know, I don't get, like, when I say boyfriend type, I know now from seeing them interact that there's nothing like sexual going on between the two of them. There maybe was at one time, but right now that does not seem to be on the table at all. So I don't think that, but there's like a vibe to him having the keys to her house and just letting himself in to watch TV that feels like that in a way that most of our friends wouldn't do. So I don't know. I'm still kind of confused by that. So Maeve comes out after yelling at Hank inside because Jared's out on the balcony. And she says something about how basically you didn't need to do such a low blow and you're also tiny in comparison to him and he could literally turn you into a stain on the floor. And Jared's like, just kind of shrugs like, I'm not sure how much of what Hank said she actually heard, but I wish Jared would like repeat to her the way that Hank spoke to him exactly so that she could get the full picture, because she says something like, you just need to get to know him. I don't really like, this is one of those things that, this happened at another point in Game of Thrones recently with the finale. People don't say the things that you want them to say. You know, there's a moment when Jon and Daenerys are talking, and he does not point out something very obvious that you feel like, why didn't you ask her this? And this moment is one of those for him. You just need to get to know him. Like, somebody telling you that you're just whining and bitching on social media, what is Jared supposed to do? You know, like, so getting to know him, it's like, yeah, but that's not, like, he's not being helpful or productive with comments like that. And it was like, what, I don't know. There's just really a point where people act like you can be as much of a dick as you want if we all know you well enough to realize that you mean well. And I don't like that attitude. I feel like it's really putting the onus of somebody else's behavior on everybody around them because they're more interested in, like, not being... because the person who is doing this sort of thing and has this sort of behavior would rather continue to do exactly what they do and force all of the people that interact with them to adapt, or nothing. That's it. They just don't want to have to put any effort into interacting with people in a more productive way. And I just think that kind of thing, like, there are certain people where it is, he didn't mean it that way. You do need to get to know him. And that can be true, where it's like a certain type of humor that somebody has that can come across really mean, you know, to somebody who doesn't know them well. But once you get to know them, you realize that it's really not mean. It's just like the way they talk. That's different. This is somebody getting into his life and accusing him of acting like a victim. And Jared has been through so much and is a victim. You know, and he has done so much more to pull himself out of a bad situation than a lot of people can manage. That to have him insulted in this way and demeaned and talked to as if he doesn't take action, as if he is somebody who would prefer to just complain than actually make a change, is so deeply wrong about who he is and insulting due to that, that I can't, like... There's just, I don't know. I just really don't like Hank. And I'm hopeful that I'll start to like him. I want to, like, kind of come around on him. But there just is a point where it's like, you know, when you need to get to know him just means he's just an asshole, and just let him be an asshole and don't take it personally. Which, no, maybe they should learn to stop being an asshole. How about that? It's not hard. But anyway, so there's this, I mean, I'll say this. She does seem to, like, yell at Hank off page, you know, so, like, it's not like she's not trying to get Hank to change his attitude, but I wouldn't be surprised if they've had this fight before with other people involved. And you know, Hank does not seem to be changing super fast, so. So he talks with Maeve about the insurance. And he says, I can't afford insurance for the Vespa. I can pay that. Or parking or gas. Done. Mom loves hogs. She'd probably die of shame if her only son rode around in public on a Tonka toy. But if I sold it, that would hurt Sophia's feelings. We can store it in my parking garage, Maeve said. Or you can use it until your car gets fixed. Maeve was momentarily taken aback, frowning, and then chuckled. I have never been maneuvered into accepting a favor before. What an odd boy you are. Mom doesn't like feeling obligated. You have to make it seem like she's doing you a favor. Maeve laughed. I really love that moment. Him having, he's developed coping mechanisms. As this title of this chapter, Dysfunctional Coping Mechanisms, he has figured out how to handle abusive people, and it can come in handy when he's dealing with people who aren't abusive, because he's learned how to like manipulate, because that's the way to like get by and survive when you live with somebody who's like on the edge all the time. So this moment for me was just, I just really liked the whole back and forth between the two of them, and the way that Maeve actually listens to him. I am growing to really like Maeve. At first I didn't know what to think of her, but as this goes on, she gives Jared real attention. You know, she's not just caring for him. She's not just giving him someplace to live and feeding him and whatever. She's sitting down and having conversations and hearing what he's saying. And because she knows her sister, she's able to like read between the lines a little bit of what he's saying to what that actually means, which is helpful, a nice little shortcut. And I just am feeling a lot more confident about him staying here. So at this moment, they get interrupted by this girl named Eliza, who is going to be having a birthday party. She lives like downstairs in this building. And it turns out that Maeve like kind of forgot that this party was happening, and she had promised that she would like get the cake and stuff. So she has to run around, and Hank agrees to go get the cake for her. She needs to like, you know, get a present. And he offers to give her the balloons that she brought when she picked him up. And she's like, but those were for you. And he's like, listen, I don't know how to tell you this, but I'm 17 years old. Balloons really aren't a thing. I'm not connected to these. It's fine. So he goes down to the party, and I love this, guys, the descriptions of the food, because these are the kinds of things that I think are really, they really underline, and it's a silly thing in some ways. I could see somebody being like, well, that's not really a big deal. But I think as a species, we really underestimate, some of us underestimate how much food connects us and gives us a sense of place. I think, you know, I developed an overeating issue, I think, in response to not having stability in my life anymore. My weight started to go up after college when my parents split up and I was living with my uncle, and things started to go badly for me. And I felt like I didn't have a place, and I ate to give myself comfort and to sort of like mentally trigger the feeling that I had when I lived at home, and these foods brought me comfort when I was safe and being taken care of. And there is a collective comfort that can come from eating foods that we all know of. And that's part of what Thanksgiving is about. We make a lot of times, the same recipes every year, even though out there is maybe a better recipe of the same thing, but this is the one that we always had when I was a kid, so we're going to make this again, kind of thing, you know? And even when you go to somebody else's place and it's not all familiar, the basics are the same. You know there's going to be a turkey. You know there's going to be mashed potatoes, like, right? And the moment here where he goes to this party, and so much of this food is totally unfamiliar to me, but he knows what it is and is excited because some of it he hasn't seen since he was a kid. This was like kind of heartwarming to me. This is the first time, as much as he doesn't feel at home in this party, this was one of the first times that I have felt like Jared is where he belongs. And I don't know if that's real or not, but I felt it. And that might just be because I personally have hangups and issues about food. And so my reaction to him finding food that is familiar to him as a kid is to be like, okay, you're safe now. And that's my like baggage talking. And that's perfectly possible. But I want to read to you because he, first of all, Kokum Darlene had an electric fryer going and was cooking bannock as she joked with another woman. So bannock, I'm given to understand, and I didn't check this actually, I had always thought of as being almost like scones. Let's see. Fried bannock. So the pictures that I'm seeing are, it's fry bread. Oh, okay. Bannock is fry bread. It's just like fried dough. I didn't realize it was the same thing because bannock's like, as far as I've always seen, I've never heard the word bannock outside of like the the Scottish, is it? Usage. And, okay, yeah, because the pictures that I'm seeing when I just search Bannock are, some of them are a little bit more scone-like. They're flatter than scones, but they're similar. But when they're fried, there's clearly a whole other, like, texture that they take on. All right, cool. So he comes in, there's that. And then he moves on to the actual table. And there is, and I'm totally into this. If everyone had eaten, they hadn't made a dent in the piles. Someone had brought deep-fried seaweed, which he hadn't had since he was a kid. He ignored the chow mein, hamburgers, lasagna, pork chops, and seal. Wild. I would be very interested to try seal. And loaded his plate with barbecued moose sausages and coho fillets. He added potato salad and some carrot slices, then globbed some jam on his bannock. So, this is so awesome because it's like a bunch of food that we all know and recognize. And then they just drop in seal and moose sausages, stuff that, like, totally unfamiliar to me. Completely. I wouldn't, if you had told me that there were moose sausages, I would have been like, I guess that makes sense. But it's not something that I would have thought of, Even the other times within these books that he's eaten moose, it's just been the actual, like, the meat itself made into a stew or whatever. So at this point, he gets interrupted by this woman who used to babysit him. She goes by Barbie. And she's, I believe, in the earlier chapter, may have said something about Barbie's, like, singing group doing songs from the mythology that's painted on the walls. So yeah, Barbie says, Maeve, Barbie's founded the Urban Heiltsuk Traditional Dance Group. We practice right here in the amenities room every Sunday. Except for days like today when it's booked. Okay, Jared said. They waited as if expecting him to volunteer or something. As the silence went on, he hunched his shoulders. He looked around. So I guess they want him to be part of the dance group. I don't know what fucking possessed them to think that he would ever want to do that. But bless their hearts. So they all go and sit down, and he inhales his food and goes and gets a second plate. And I'm keeping an eye on how much he's eating, because I still am, I'm still sort of suspicious of the energy drain that has been happening, where he's feeling so exhausted at the house. And I'm wondering if eating a lot will help him in that regard. I'm keeping an eye on it to see if this is something that keeps, like, popping up, that he's eating a lot more than he usually does. So this is when he meets Barbie's brothers, Patrick and Robert. And let's see, right. And this is Dakota, Maeve said, who's bunking in with Hank. Just Coda, the guy with the neck tattoo, said. "Aw, don't be like that," Robert said. "We like your stripper name." "Shut up, sponge," Coda said. The Star Brothers snickered, and Coda hucked pieces of bannock at him. "I'm going for some fresh air. Can I bum a smoke off you?" "Go to hell." "Aw, did I hurt your little feelings?" "Quit being a cheap fuck and buy your own smokes." The Star Brothers exchanged glances and got up to check out the desserts. Mavis and Barbie sat, and Jared took the seat beside them, tuning out as they started talking about people from Bella Bella whom he didn't know. So he goes and gets seconds, and then there's this part. A girl peeked at him from behind one of the couches. She'd bucked the princess trend and was full zombie, with an impressive makeup job on her cheek that showed yellowed bone, and a threadbare gray costume that floated when she moved. She held a wooden whistle to her lips and played random notes. "Walking Dead fan?" Jared said. She tooted and then hid behind the couch again. "Me too," he said. "Can you see her?" Princess said, coming up behind them. "What?" "Her name is Shu," Princess said. "It's a good zombie costume," Jared said. "I'm like Princess Elsa," Princess said. Hi. That was a ghost, Jared. Jared, she said you can see her? Bitch, how are you this dense? I'm starting to get real irritated with you, buddy. You need to get a clue here. This is really like, Lord have mercy, guy. I just don't know what more you need. You know, it takes him so long to figure out that something is really happening. And I get, like, life would be simpler if it wasn't happening. And I understand wanting to be in denial, but there just really comes a point where it's like, you're being purposefully obtuse here and you're slowing everything down. So fucking get on point. Just, you know, this is a zombie girl. It's a zombie girl wandering around. Deal with it. So, let's see. Oh, here it is. Maeve offers to have Hank take Jared to one of his AA meetings. And Jared's like a little bit private about it and feels like Hank's going to go in with him or something. But when she assures him, no, he's just going to drop you off and then he'll go and do his own thing and come get you. I like the fact that Jared's kind of like, I don't want him with me. Because, like, yeah, you wouldn't. Meetings like that, you're making yourself very vulnerable. So you don't want some guy who's been an asshole to you, implying that you just like to make yourself a victim, coming with you to some shit like that. So, we go to the car and they're all getting a ride together because it turns out Coda also goes to AA meetings. And the brothers are sitting there smoking Coda's cigarettes. And he gets really irritated and is yelling at them about it. And Hank says, keep out of his stuff or find another place to play Xbox, Hank called. Yes, Daddy, the brothers chorused. You owe me 2 fucking packs, Sponge, Coda said. Pat fucking smoked some too, Sponge said. Language, Hank said. Yes, Daddy, the brothers chorused again. I'm gonna murder them, Coda said. Do it quietly and clean up after yourself, Hank said. So this establishes that these two dudes they're kinds of pains in the asses. Coda is like getting too old for this shit and does not have the patience. Hank maybe is a little bit too like lenient with them. And they go to the AA meeting and Coda is talking about like on the way there, he points out about how he doesn't really feel like he wants to take a ride home with Hank, that he wants to just walk back because he feels like Hank is being overbearing with him as well. And Jared's like, when Coda says, show me some fucking trust, man, and if you language me again, I'm gonna shove your fucking face through the fucking windshield. I'm hearing that Coda needs some space, Jared said. They both turned to give him beady eyes. Thanks for the ride, Jared said, and quickly exited the Honda. So I really like that little moment of Coda just like straight up being like, Hank, fuck you. And Jared needing to pipe in, because of course he does. You can't watch somebody that's been annoying you get ripped up by somebody else and not jump in there and try and like be part of it. Like that's gotta be, yeah. Jared, wait for Coda, Hank yelled. So what, you're hiring guards now? Coda said. He's Maeve's jelly bean, dumbass. If he gets hurt on our watch, we'll never hear the end of it. Make sure he doesn't get in trouble and don't make him cry. You're leaving me to wipe his fucking ass? Nice. Guys, Jared said, the car isn't soundproof. So they start talking briefly about like what situations they came out of. And it turns out that Coda's gay, and he came out to his dad, and his dad beat the hell out of him and just like kicked him out. And he had to live with his with Hank's gran. So I don't know how like related they are, but Coda comes from a similar situation in a lot of ways because of the abuse and substance abuse issues and everything. Like he knows even who Jared's mother is and has met her and says like, she seemed pretty hardcore when I met her. Like he knows because he bought drugs off of her that one time. So starting chapter 16, we have the dream of Sarah coming out of the woods in the white dress with her eyes entirely black, and then Jared like waking up suddenly, and he has this like, he woke in time to see a fuzzy shape disappearing from his bedroom window. No, listen, I know that later on there's a face, and that's bad enough, but I'm really hoping that this isn't a fucking river otter. I just don't, guys. He yawned. He must have dozed off while texting because his phone was dead when he picked it up off his chest. Yo, guys, listen. Something is drawing power off of this, and they're drawing power literally from the electronics as well. I am telling you right now, this is ghost shit. Electronics going dead is like classic ghost behavior, okay? Him being tired, dozing off without even meaning to, again. And then he gets up and like makes a whole roast because he's like, you know, there's something going on. One of the faces painted on the wall winked at him. He rubbed his eyes. The face was serene again, and he decided coffee was more important than brushing the gunk from his teeth. So, he goes and gets this thing and starts rolling it in the flour in order to sear it and put it into the slow cooker. And when Maeve comes out, because he like wakes up and he isn't sure if it's like evening or morning because it's so gray outside that it could be either one. But when she comes out and she says, "Why are you making supper at this ungodly hour?" It's clear that this is really, really early morning. And he like puts a bunch of veggies in there as well and cooks it all up and puts it in the slow cooker. And she's watching him, asking him where he learned to cook and all of this stuff. And then she, this moment, guys, my writing grant is paying my rent and bills until January, Maeve said. But after that, I'll need to get a roommate. Jared studied her, waiting for her to ask him to leave so she could rent his room. I was your age when I went out on my own. Mother and I had differences. I made mistakes I regret. What did the Heilsick Bang Council say about funding? Did you ever talk to them? They don't know me, Maeve. Jared, I don't know. You'll get funding, Jared. Maybe not while you're upgrading, but next year. You could stay here rent-free, and then next year, when you get funding, you can pay rent, okay? I wouldn't have to look for a roommate, so you'd actually be helping me. No obligations at all. She grinned. Think about it. So I loved that he assumes when she says this. I, of course, hear this and assume personally that she's going to ask him to be her roommate. But he hears this and assumes that she's going to need to rent his room out. And so is waiting for her to, like, drop that bad news. And I just really, that being where his mind goes first, that he's going to be chucked out because she needs to make some money. It's really sad, but it's understandable, Jared went to the bedroom and emptied his jeans pockets because she's asking him for darks to make a load of laundry. And as he's getting undressed, one of the faces on the wall opened its mouth. So he goes out and takes a jog. And when he comes home, there's fucking David. I knew this was going to happen. As soon as he decided to go and jog all by himself in a strange neighborhood, I was like, David's totally waiting for you, dude. And sure enough, David held his phone up, probably recording Jared. He wished he wasn't standing there like a dummy. David started his car, signaled, and drove away. Shaky anger, all the emotions. Had David been there the whole time and Jared had missed him? A big fat middle finger of an appearance. You and your Facebook drama. Ha, this is what I think of that. Was that your stalker? Someone said. And this is Coda. That kind of stupid gets you stomped, Coda said. It's early, Jared said. I've only had one coffee. His stupidity, Coda said, not yours. Between Hank and your mom, that dude's going to end up an organ donor. So I like that outlook, and I hope that you're right, Coda, because honestly, nobody should get that guy's organs, because clearly they would turn into some sort of serial killer, but it's fine. So then he gets a text message that says, great seeing you again. We'll chat soon. I owe you, Jared. I'm going to pay you back every single thing you and your mom gave me. And this is his new number. So he has no idea how David got this number. And that is a really concerning bit of information that I'm very curious about. Because it means that either, there's a number in Jared's phone that he thought was somebody else's when he sent out that blast to let everybody know he had a new number. Or one of his friends is an idiot and gave the number to David. Or David broke in and took the number off of his mother's phone. I don't know, but I don't like this. So they go to the meeting, and afterward, they go back to the apartment building, and they can hear all of the Xbox sounds outside. And Coda does not want to go back into the apartment because he's just like, oh my God, they are so loud, those two. And Jared offers for him to come and hang out at Maeve's. And Coda's kind of like, listen, her place is a little bit crazy with the hoarding and whatnot. And it's funny because he said that before he even knew about the paintings. Because when he does come over later, he sees those wall murals and is just like, what the fuck? And that is the correct reaction. And I am hopeful that they actually do serve a purpose and are protecting. But as far as how many things seem to be able to come and go, I don't know. So he comes home and there's bathrobe next to the TV. And this is the first time in this section that Jared comes across him. But bathrobe keeps on showing up. And every time Jared smudges, he goes away, but it doesn't last. The smudging wears off and he has to do it all over again. And the ghost, every time he pops back up again, it's just like, I'm not even doing anything to you. What's your problem? There are way worse ones out there than me. I just want to watch TV. Can't you just let me watch Doctor Who? Oh my God. And I kind of felt for him a little bit, but I also, this is not your place anymore, guy. Move on. Figure it out. So Jared, in order to sort of drown out the fact that there's a ghost in the house that keeps talking to him, he puts on headphones and he starts to do housework. He washes all the dishes. He cleans out the refrigerator. He's standing in the living room and then he sees that there is a pile of unassembled bookcases in the living room. And there's a power drill. And he pulls that shit up and he puts that together. I feel like I connect with Jared on this level in particular. Being idle is something that I'm not good at. And it's surprising because sitting still, I'm really good at. People assume that if you aren't a super active person, that it just means that you do nothing all day. But the truth is that I need to be doing something. It's just not necessarily, what a lot of people associate with being active. So housework, just tidying things up and making it look nice is super important to my mental health being okay. If there is a project that's sitting there needing to get done, oftentimes that will sort of hang over me until I do it. Not always. There are times where I let things slide for a long time. But I'm often in our household the one that's all right, we just got to get this done. And Owen's the one that's fine. But it wears on me a lot more than him if something is obviously needing to be taken care of and we haven't done it. So he is pulling out all of the pieces and puts together all of this stuff. And it's 10 bookcases that wrap all the way around the living room. And as he's doing this ghost keeps talking to him and telling him how cruel he is and yada, yada, yada. And finally, Coda comes in. And it's funny because he tries to talk to Jared and Jared thinks it's the ghost and just ignores him until finally Coda's hi. Which I found pretty funny, to be honest. So, is dinner ready? Coda said. Help yourself, Jared said. And Hank asks, do you do this? And he's yeah. He says Santa and his elves stopped by. And I really rather enjoy that there's this moment that I think is actually kind of important where Hank is reevaluating that Jared is not just somebody who sits around and does nothing. The fact that Jared did the dishes, took out the garbage, he's somebody who I feel like Hank might respect under other circumstances. And maybe could still grow to respect. So Hank helps Jared brace all of the bookshelves against the walls because apparently where they live is a really high earthquake threat zone. So anything that's not secured to the walls could be incredibly dangerous. So they're working on that. And as they're doing this, he gets a text from Sarah. And it says, "You still hum like power lines. I hear you everywhere I go." And I am dying to know what the fuck that means. "Where are you?" Jared texted back. He got up, went into the bedroom, and waited for her to respond. The cursor blinked and blinked. "I'm not the one haunting this room," Bathrobe said, peering in from the door. "I'm the good guy." Coda walked through the ghost, sucking sauce off his fingers. He stopped, eyeballed the walls with a grimace. What a fucking freak show. "It's okay," Jared said. "Dude, it's right up there with clowns painted by serial killers." Then Hank walked through Bathrobe, who sighed heavily and blinked out of existence. I really laughed at the way this ghost is just around and nobody notices. So Hank says something about Edgar, who did these paintings, being troubled. Coda's "Troubled? Try total whack job." And Hank asks if he can take the garbage out that's sitting there waiting. And he's "Yeah, go ahead." And there's something about Hank doing that again, makes me think that he's kind of all right, you're earning your keep here. I can respect this. All right. So Maeve comes home and she is elated because those bookcases have been sitting there for a minute. And not only did he put them all together, but he arranged them in the exact way that she imagined it being arranged. She says that it's he read her mind. And I really like that moment. I thought that was sweet. This whole thing is just a nice bit of closeness between everybody when they're all working together for the common goal of making this room better, So at one point Jared gets distracted looking at this ghost and everybody's sort of "Hey dude, You all right? You're just standing there staring at nothing. Maybe you should just take a break. And he tries to be like, no, I'm fine. And they're like, no, really, you don't. This doesn't seem great. So they have dinner. The roast is awesome. They completely clean it out, and there's nothing left. And there's this moment where Hank and Mavis both paused to consider him, then changed a look. As they sorted through the piles of books, they had a weird shorthand Jared couldn't break. So, I don't know. Yeah? Better. Maeve wrapped Jared in another hug and told him to go to bed. I am dying to know what that shorthand meant. It feels like she's saying she isn't sure if he's going to stay or not, but she thinks things have gotten better than they were at first, and he's more at ease, I think is what she's saying, but who knows. And then there's this moment where she told him to go to bed. Jared sat down, annoyed, and was trying to form enough words to tell her off when he realized he was face down on the couch. He felt Maeve tuck a blanket around his legs, or at least he assumed it was Maeve. Hank didn't seem like the blanket-tucking type. So, again, he's just, like, leveled really abruptly with tiredness. And I just don't, like, this is significant. And I'm surprised that nobody else is seeming to notice just how much time he's spending asleep. So he stays on the couch for a while and is listening to Maeve and Hank talking, and then realizes, like, that he's so tired that getting up to go to bed sounds like too much work. He was too tired to move. That's fucking serious. Like, something's happening. And then we go to him seeing some shit in his room. Now, he heard a bang. His eyes opened. A part of the floor slithered. The apartment lights were off, and he couldn't hear his aunt anymore. He sat up, groggily wondering how long he'd been asleep. In the darkness, he felt something watching him. He lifted his feet off the floor, feeling silly doing it, but doing it anyway. Maybe I'm dreaming, he thought. As his eyes adjusted, he thought he could make out a figure crouching in the corner, a slightly darker shadow that shifted, studying him the way he was studying it. A bang at the window drew his attention. His eyes slid off what they saw. On the other side of the pane, a face, a crazy-ass, bodiless face with twisted lips and boggled, excited eyes, flew loopy dips and zipped up and sideways like a hummingbird. Jared decided he was stuck in a weird dream, even as the head banged itself against the window some more. So he goes to the window and it like dips down and comes back up almost like it's shy. And then later on, it puts his mouth against the window and like blows, and all of the people around the room sort of, like all of the paintings move as it does that, like it's blowing life into them somehow. From the corner of his eye, Jared saw the shadow of a man crawl into the wall. His mouth went dry. The hair on his arms and the back of his neck went stiff, and his heart hammered in his chest. "I can hear you," a familiar voice said inside his head. Wiegit, the trickster, who hadn't spoken to him since the incident at the cave. "Listen, you giant headache, you're somewhere in East Van. You're frightened and you're broadcasting feedback screams on all frequencies. Way to call attention to yourself. See if I save your ungrateful ass again when something dangerous comes to eat you." So, I don't understand why everybody's yelling at him about broadcasting when they have to know he has no idea what that even means. But this floating head, I think, is protecting him from whatever that crouching thing is. But I would like to register a complaint with the fact that it's a floating head protecting him, and I don't care for it. Thank you very much. So I hardly have any time left, but I'm going to finish with Chapter 17, First Day of Class. He's like on the bus, and fucking ghost jaguars are passing him, and he has to ignore them. He sends Granny Nita a note telling her where he's staying and what's going on. And then he goes and meets a couple of kids. One of them sits next to him and says, "Are you Nish? Anishinaabe?" "Excuse me?" Jared asked. "Are you a skin?" "What?" Pfft, the guy said, "Don't even know what you are, man." "He's asking if you're First Nations." "Oh, Heltsuk." "I don't know that one," the guy said. "Island in the BC, doorknob," the chubby blonde explained. "I'm Talton," she said. "Evan here is from Winnipeg." So it seems like they're going to be okay. But then the professor, who is the one that went on a date with Maeve and apparently got super duper clingy very, very quickly, he decides to single Jared out. And when everybody introduces themselves and says where they're from, he basically tells everybody in the class how amazing Maeve is for 5 minutes and just makes it real weird. And did she mention me? Dude, this is, I'm being that guy, aren't I? No. She said she had a great time, but she hasn't returned any of my calls or texts or emails. Dude, you need to stop. It's too bad. And he keeps trying to bring it up and finally starts to realize that maybe this is not the thing to do. But it's just really awkward. And Maeve, when he goes home, he goes out to a park and finds a cedar that's kind of glowing in this way because he knows that he needs to smudge and do it seriously, and he needs to do it with cedar. So he's going down through this park to find a spot with a tree that calls to him specifically, and he finds it. And he does that saging, and Maeve is kind of "You're using an awful lot of sage lately. Is everything cool?" And he's no, it's fine. And I'm trying to there's this little talk between the two of them where they're getting interrupted by the ghost, and she doesn't realize that this is happening. But she is talking to him about getting new clothes, and he doesn't want to. And she's just can you just let me do this? And he doesn't want to give an inch on this. So this ends with her looking at him and asking, "What are you staring at?" And it's the ghost yelling about how he wants to watch Star Trek. And it's just so awkward. Oh my God. Emote somewhere else, Captain Kirk. "Yeah, you're a riot," Bathrobe said, peering over his shoulder at the screen. "A real fracking comedian." And that is the end of the chapter. So, let it be known that this ghost also watches Battlestar Galactica. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap this, but thank you all very, very much for listening. Thank you so much to Robin for commissioning this episode. I'm sorry that I sound crazy. I sound better now than I did at the beginning. And yeah, I will be seeing you all again soon with a new episode. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.